excited, everybody, to debut a brand new podcast here, the Hawaiʻi Football Now podcast, right here on ESPN Honolulu, our family of networks. And we're going to be bringing you about a weekly recording or so, everything to do with Hawaiʻi football. We got you covered from end to end, and we got a pretty fun setup, we think, to get going as we debut this week, heading into week 2 of the University of Hawaiʻi season. We got to recap week 1, and we will be doing that throughout the season. My name's Jordan Helle, broadcaster with Spectrum, doing some radio work on the island of Maui as well. Co-host the Let's Talk Sports podcast with Kanoa Leahey, which you can hear right here on the ESPN Honolulu family of networks as well. I played a little small-time college football. How small, you ask? Well, the school I went to, it doesn't even have football anymore. They dropped the sport. That's how small-time it was. But we've got a guy who played a little bigger-time college football, and that is Hunter Hughes, former University of Hawaiʻi quarterback, playing for both Coach Norm Chow, Coach Nick Rolovich. A pretty good golfer in his free time as well. But Hunter, I am pumped, man, to partner up for this podcast. If you want to share a little bit about your background as well, before we dive into a little pigskin talk here.
Jordan, thank you so much for the intro. It's great to be back talking UH football, back to have football around again. It's always good this time of the year. I feel like I come back to life around the football season. So yeah, man, so stoked to be a part of this with you. If you're listening, we're stoked you guys are here and a part of this. And yeah, I played a little bit of football for University of Hawaiʻi. I was a walk-on under the Norm Chow era. Played 2 years for him, 2 years for Coach Rolovich. As a Hale boy from the mainland, it is absolutely a privilege to have worn the Hawaii H on my helmet. I consider it one of the greatest honors of my athletic career, being a Rainbow Warrior. I wear it with pride everywhere I go still to this day. I am so thankful to be a part of that Rainbow Warrior Ohana. And speaking of which, Jordan, man, it's been a tough first start for us, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, without a doubt, right? And we will dive into that for sure. It's kind of funny. Hunter and I got a little conversation going earlier today as we kind of got ready for the debut episode of this. And you can hear the passion from Hunter as an alum, as a guy who went through this program, as he mentioned, a guy from the mainland who has now made Hawaii his home and still has very deep affinity for the program. And I think that will shine through as we go throughout this podcast's existence, if you want. I think you'll hear that passion and the insight as well. And as you talked about, Hunter, it's kind of nice to be in a normal rhythm, right? We had to wait until late October last year because of the late start to the Mountain West season with all the COVID delays on last year. And so to have sort of a traditional lead up to the season, a spring practice, a summer camp, and then a week 0 game. And so, it's a chance to play on national television for the University of Hawaiʻi, a chance to play on a very limited schedule right in week 0, where there aren't as many games that you have to compete against for eyeballs. And with that golden opportunity came a trip to the Rose Bowl in week 0 to take on UCLA. Of course, it was a 44-10 loss for the University of Hawaiʻi in their 2020 debut, second season under head coach Todd Graham, first full season, as you are well aware, with the 9-game abbreviated 2019 campaign. It was a tough one from the start, 24-3 after the first quarter, 31-3 at halftime. The rushing numbers kind of tell the tale as UCLA picked up nearly 6 yards a carry, 4 touchdowns on the ground, including 3 from Zach Charbonnet, the Michigan transfer. He had 3 touchdowns on just 6 carries, eclipsed the century mark in that one. And we can get into some of the numbers a little bit more as we go throughout, Hunter. But what was kind of your main takeaway from this? And I know a lot of people are going to look to push the panic button and all of the cliches there, but I mean, what's your level of confidence kind of heading into the rest of the season after Saturday's debut? It is just one of 13, as we know.
It is. Yeah, when you look at our team, there's a lot of newness. Yes, this is Todd Graham's second year, but really this is us as the media, us as Rainbow Warrior fans, first time kind of getting to see Coach Graham for, a full year, getting through camp, both spring and then fall, seeing some of the recruits come in and just get a feeling for what it's going to be like under the Todd Graham regime. And yeah, to open up a season against a Pac-12 school and a good one under Chip Kelly at UCLA at the Rose Bowl. It's exciting as a player to get to go and to play in such a storied venue like that. But then you also have your work cut out for you. Anytime you go and play a Pac-12 school, you have to be situational perfect. You can't be doing a lot of penalties. You can't turn the ball over to have any chance of topping those guys. And so, say what you will, I'm just thankful that we have football again, and I thought our guys played hard. Regardless of what the score might have said or what maybe some people might think or feel about the way they played, they still got on the plane and are playing football right now in a very troubled time in our world. And the fact that they are choosing to play in the midst of such adversity, I think should spur on a lot of hope for us as fans and as and supporters of the program.
Yeah, and a chance to bounce back this week against Portland State in their home opener, and we'll kind of get to that in the second half of our debut episode here. You mentioned, the effort was there. I think there was no doubt about that. It's some pretty hot conditions, without a doubt, there in Pasadena. But Coach Grant said it himself, right? They got outplayed, they got outcoached, kind of across the board. And so I was kind of curious, Hunter, before we kind of dive into some of the areas improvement, maybe focusing on some bright spots. Chevron Cordero kind of grew into the game a little bit, even though we saw some of the mistakes, put the ball on the ground once, had an interception on a botched screen pass play, but did throw the lone touchdown for the University of Hawaii. Got to play most of the game, maybe to some people surprised with the scoreline the way it was. We saw Braden Traeger, the backup, the true freshman out of Texas, come in, get a series or two very late in the ball game. 10 different guys caught a pass in that ball game. The running backs were a focal point of the passing game. Both Day Hunter in the backfield, along with Dedrick Parson. Calvin Turner kind of held in check a little bit. Defensively, mixed bag, obviously, giving up a ton on the ground, some missed tackles adding up. But you look at a guy like Darius Muasau, double-digit tackles again. Jonah Laulu getting a start at defensive end, 2 sacks to go along with 6 tackles. And so, again, there are varying individual successes, if you will, across the board to go along with the team loss. But what were some of the bright spots that kind of stood out to you that maybe we can take away as positives heading into week 2?
Well, I would say, I immediately, I played quarterback, so I immediately look to the quarterback position. I'm looking at how we're handling the football, how our receivers are running their routes, how we're getting open, are those balls hitting them in stride? Kind of all of that plays into how well our offense has to do. Not to mention how our O-line does, and then the rushing game as well. I thought Chevin looked really poised, almost to a fault, I would say. The D-line from UCLA came out with so much, we call it juice. They just came out with such fire, and they were ready to go. And they're bigger than our O-line. And from the get-go, it looked like our offensive line was kind of overwhelmed, but it didn't look like Chevin was that pressured. That obviously there were sacks and things like that, but he held in the pocket, to my opinion, pretty well, in spite of guys kind of flying all around him. And where, in past seasons, he might have felt the pressure and just jumped right out of the pocket. I didn't see that so much this time around. He kind of stuck in there, dug the feet in, and he was trying to make convicted throws. So say what you will, I thought he did a good job there. You could tell that whether it be from Coach Bo, the quarterback's coach, or from Coach Graham himself, I feel like they're trying to help him be more of a true passer in this offense. So that was definitely something I noticed. And then, too, even seeing the stat line right here, the fact that Darius Muasau had 11 tackles, when you could tell UCLA's assignment was to take care of him. And the fact that he was still able to get through the blocks and make some plays. I mean, it just shows the type of player he is, and how lucky we are to have him on the defensive side.
Yeah, without a doubt, right? Muasau's all over the place. Kind of circling back on some of those thoughts, Hunter, you mentioned, Chevin maybe poised to a fault. Is that, just wondering if you could kind of expand upon that a little bit. Is that just maybe wanting to see a little bit more urgency? I think the other thing that is sort of the underlying theme with a lot of that analysis that you just mentioned is, this is a new offense for Chevin Cordero, right? It's been well talked about, no doubt about it, but being a guy who grew up in the run and shoot through St. Louis school and then being recruited as such, that type of quarterback under the Rolovich era. And we saw a little bit of that transition last season where we kind of, by the end of the season, we saw the tight end in there. We saw a little bit more of that run and gun type of offense that Coach Graham and his teams have become known for. And so that is very much a transition. And as a guy who played that position, how difficult is that? You mentioned, maybe the poise in the pocket, something that's good, but we've seen him escape a little bit more. I mean, just how does that all sort of translate in terms of a guy like Chevin Cordero, his skill set, his background sort of growing into what this coaching staff wants that offense to look like?
Yeah, I got to give Chevin a lot of credit. Just from me as a player, playing under the run and shoot, it's such a different mentality when you're playing the quarterback position in that offense. You can literally get the football out of your hands in less than 2 seconds sometimes. You usually have a short route on one side and then a deeper route on the other side, every single snap of the football. Not to mention some of the mechanics, for those out there that may not know what I'm talking about. The drop back in the run and shoot looks completely different than any other style of offense, where the quarterback will literally flow to one side of the field or the other, which, if you guys remember, Timmy Chang, obviously Nick Rolovich, and then the late, great Colt Brennan, whenever they would drop back, they would flow to one side or the other. In this new offense, you can't really do that. And so, speaking to that, I got to tip my cap to Chevin for just his versatility and his coachability to change from something that he was taught his entire life. And then not to mention a whole new passing scheme, offensive strategy. It's a lot to take as a quarterback. Something that you kind of have to roll with the punches, and I give him a lot of credit. And yeah, I said to a fault with his poise, because we did take some sacks. There were times when perhaps he could have gotten rid of the ball. I didn't get a chance to see the team film from up top to see if some of those throws could have been made. It's awfully tough with just the broadcast to see if there were opportunities out there. So yeah, it's tough to tell from week one. We can chalk it up to this is just a learning experience. We're still learning in this offense, and we'll see how we do against Portland State. But that was kind of the meaning behind some of the things I said.
No, I think you're a great guy to ask about it, right? Because you went through a similar transition. I mean, the Norm Chow era, that offense, and the Nick Rolovich era transitioning into what they were running on. It's a drastic change, and so. It's all part of the growing pains, right? And I think the coaching staff kind of recognizes that. And we saw that last year, right? They were willing to sort of gradually get to that point. We saw a little bit of a mixture, now a bit much more of what Coach Todd Graham has run in the past. At least that's what we are expecting. And so I was kind of curious, what do you anticipate? It seems like they haven't quite figured out exactly what that identity is going to look like, right? Because there are more than one way to skin a cat. We know that. Different offenses can put up a lot of points. And Todd Graham, his teams have done that every place that he has gone, whether it's been Rice, Tulsa, Pitt, Arizona State. His teams have been able to score and running a slightly different version of an offense that what I think traditionally has worked at the University of Hawaiʻi. But that is by no means a reason why this cannot work. And so, with that in mind and kind of knowing his past pedigree and what those teams look like, what do you expect the identity of this team to kind of morph into? Because the talent is there. At least we have seen it, right, at the skill position. Guys like Calvin Turner, who was much more a receiver than a runner in game one this year, as opposed to what we saw last year, no carries for him. But guys like Jared Smart, we saw Aaron Cephas, we saw some of these other playmakers that are available at the disposal, and then the depth at running back, right, with Hunter and Parsons and some of these other guys, and now with Phillips and company at tight end. There are various groups that could really make a difference. And so as we saw, were you seeing glimpses of what that identity could look like, and what do you expect to see that over the next couple of weeks as we kind of gear up towards conference play?
To be completely honest, no, I did not see an identity. I would have loved to. I know they're kind of an RPO, um, air raid from what we've heard. Friends of mine that are on the team, that's kind of their best way of describing it as well too. Which also isn't what your identity is. It can kind of leave you wondering, well, what are we doing out there? But you're exactly right. There are a million ways to skin a cat. There are limitless ways of getting into the end zone. And so I'm not saying one way is better than the other. I think us as Hawaii fans have a little bit of a bias where it's run and shoot or nothing else. Me as a quarterback, I like the run and shoot better than anything else too. I'm a little bit biased in that regard. But when you're looking at coaching, you have to do best with the guys that you have. And if our protection is going to be exposed the way that it was in game one, we have to find a way to protect our quarterbacks. And that might mean getting rid of the football quicker. And so with that, there were times when UCLA would bring the house. And because of that, their cornerbacks actually gave a lot of cushion to our guys on the outside. And so just, again, I'm a fan now. I'm no longer a player. But as someone who knows the game, I was wanting them to get rid of the football out to the flats quicker, to protect Chevin and just to put it in our playmakers' hands. I mean, our receiving core is deep, crazy deep. I think if we can get the balls in our playmakers' hands, guys like Smart, guys like Martiner, obviously Calvin Turner, that's where we're going to find success. I think before game one, we had a lot of high hopes for this offensive line. Sure, you're looking at Pac-12 too, that they've got a huge defensive line. It's going to be tough to push those guys in the trenches and get anything established running the ball. But it's something to keep in mind that maybe in your back pocket, maybe we don't just do that, but we look to, I don't know, like maybe call a few plays that these guys know how to run. I mean, a lot of these guys that are on the field right now were recruited during the Rolovich era. Let them be the type of players they were recruited to be, is what I would say.
Yeah, and that's always part of the transitional
Yeah.
process, right? No doubt about that. You mentioned the offensive line, kind of switching over to the other side of the football, and the defensive line, right? And the guys up front. And I think, not the best games for either of those two units, like particularly knowing the pedigree of those two units. And I think, you get into the conversation of, hey, against Mountain West opponents, it might look a little bit differently. But for the defense in particular, right, the big question mark was, were they going to be improved against the run? I think that was clear last season in 2019, watching this team. They were not great against the run. The back end of the defense has been pretty good and continues to be pretty good. And we've seen a few different alignments, right? Whether it's the four-man front on the defensive line, being multiple on the defensive end, using a lot of those hybrid safeties to come down as outside linebackers, kind of those flex positions that they used to help support in the run. What do you see on that side of the football? We mentioned some of those UCLA rushing numbers, and they were eye-opening and they were frequent throughout the game. And so, that wasn't the improvement that I think a lot of people were looking for. But did you see anything that maybe could be foretelling to how this team is going to play the run this season?
Yeah, I mean, again, I look immediately to the quarterback position. I was not all that impressed with the quarterback play from Dorian Thompson-Robinson on UCLA. I thought that game could have been 65-0 after that first quarter, very, very quickly. If that guy was hitting his spots, it would have been over. And he wasn't, which speaks both to, I think, maybe his ill-preparedness, but then also the talent of our DBs and our safeties. That is one thing I was impressed with from our DBs. I really thought that they attacked the football really well, that they seemed to just be missiles for the football. And then obviously we have a stud of a linebacker, probably going to be all Mountain West this year, in Darius Muasau, and probably get drafted. And so those are obvious high points. And I don't know if you heard, Jordan, but that there were some things that Todd Graham even spoke earlier this week about some of the D linemen being on COVID protocol right before game time at UCLA. And so some might say that's an excuse. Others might say, hey, what are you going to do? It happened. So if they weren't able to practice at full capacity as a defensive squad, I mean, it shows on the field when, I got to be honest, they ran through us like tissue paper. So if I am an offensive scout for another team looking at Hawaii, I mean, I'm running it right down our throat. It was very, very exposing. And as long as you block Mr. Muasau, you're going to be getting yards. So from a defensive front perspective, I'm a little worried. And that's supposed to be Coach Graham's specialty. He's a defensive first coach. And so I'm wanting to see that unit tighten the screws a little bit, because in the Mountain West, you got to be able to stop it. You really do. So yeah, that's what I would say about that.
Yeah, you mentioned Dorian Thompson-Robinson, just 10 of 20 for 130 yards through the air in that game. So a little bit something of a positive to take away. And so to kind of put a bow on this UCLA game before we start looking ahead to Portland State, obviously the conversation centers around, how much do you take away, right? Because of the level of opponent, a Pac-12 team that should be pretty competitive in that South Division. Is this more of just simply being outmanned, some of the weak spots, if you will, from week one, or is it a little bit more of a scheme type of thing? I don't know which is a bigger concern necessarily, but you figure the level of competition isn't going to quite be UCLA every week. But is it more of just a personnel thing that you think led to the result, or is it more of a scheme thing that needs to be tweaked a little bit?
It's a great question. Because we went up out of conference and played a strong UCLA team that in a lot of ways was bigger, stronger, faster, better than our unit. It's tough to really answer those questions with a lot of sincerity. There were, a few places where I felt like UCLA just wanted it more. Definitely from an offensive perspective, watching how their D linemen just attacked us. And then, going back to the defensive side of the football for Hawaii, that running back's a stud. Friends of mine were joking that he's already got that highlight tape being created in some video software for himself, getting ready for the NFL draft after that game, because that was top tier level right there, what he did to us. It wasn't like we weren't getting helmets on the football. We were getting right to him, but man, he ran right through us. And again, that's a Big Ten running back transferring to a Pac-12 school. So you could chalk it up to that guy just being a top tier talent. We played a guy a few years back from San Diego State. I think I forget what his last name was. He was number 29. He broke Marshall Faulk's record, and he always tore through us. So I mean, that just happens. It happens when you play top level guys. They can do that to you in college football. So we'll see. With Portland State right now, we should be on the side of being a little bit bigger, stronger, faster, and a little better than them. The danger of that, though, is a lot of times we as Hawaii can get kind of stagnant, not coming out with that same sort of fire that we need to handle business. So I'm wanting our guys to come out with just a tad more juice and see if we can't win the battle up front, because it really is in the trenches where things are made.
Yeah, Donald Pumphrey, I think the running back
Pumphrey,
maybe
that was
from
it.
San Diego State. Yeah, he was good. San Diego State's always got backs, right? They
Pumphrey.
can run the football. There's no doubt about it. But I think it's a fair point by you, Hunter, as we kind of put a bow on this UCLA game, right? It's impossible to know after one game how good UCLA is going to be, where Hawaii is going to be at, come middle of the season, end of the season. And I think you bring up the Portland State game, and that is a fair thing to bring up because, it is a situation where you figure, okay, Hawaii should be the team that has the better caliber of football player. And then, we can kind of have a much better sample size. Hey, maybe a team that was a little above our weight class and a team that's a little below. And then I think we will have a much better sense of where things are at personnel-wise, scheme-wise, execution-wise after next week.
We're healthy now,
Yeah,
and
true.
Our D-line linebackers, whoever he added on, that list of players that were under COVID protocol, I think we'll get a much stronger sample size of where we're at if everybody is quote unquote healthy now. So,
yeah, I think that's a great point. So we'll take a quick break here, and then we'll dive into the Vikings. Portland State coming to town. First time since 2000. I'm sure a game a lot of folks will remember. Back with a little more after this.
You're listening to Hawaiʻi Football Now from ESPN Honolulu with Jordan Helle and Hunter Hughes.
All right, so the home opener coming up this week, Saturday, at the Clarence T.C. Ching Athletics Complex. That's right, the first home game on campus for the University of Hawaii. We all know what happened with Aloha Stadium, and the temporary home, at least for the time being, is the Ching Athletics Complex there on campus in Manoa. No fans, unfortunately, due to governmental regulations and trying to keep everybody safe. I know that mixed reactions to that, but last time the University of Hawaii had played Portland State, 2000, a loss to the Vikings, the only loss in 5 meetings against Portland State. That was a sellout crowd at Aloha Stadium. It'll be much different in front of, media, officials, and the like, but nobody else there on campus. Hunter, before we get into the Vikings a little more specifically, just your thoughts on the reality now that this team will be playing on campus, much smaller, much more intimate venue. Obviously, no fans, unfortunately, to get this era of UH football started, but a little excitement, at least, the fact that they were, they don't got to take the bus out to Halava. They just walk over from the locker room down there on lower campus.
Jordan, this could be a hallmark change to the program for our future. I really, really believe that. If you look at the teams in the Mountain West, I got love for all those schools, but there is no reason we should be losing the recruiting battle to those schools. If you look at anybody on the mainland, you ask them, do you want to play? Got love for you, Fresno. Do you want to play at Fresno or do you want to play at Hawaii? There is no reason we should be losing those guys. And when you look at some of the nitty-gritties on why we lose some of those guys, I really think a lot of that has to do with having a better on-campus presence as a football program. I think us being able to have our games on campus just keeps the party on campus. A lot of times, students aren't able to get out to Aloha Stadium. You guys already know this. And so if we're able to keep it kind of in-house, boost our facilities a little bit, and keep things here in Manoa, man, I really personally believe the sky is the limit. And some say the stadium is smaller. There's nothing wrong with having a little smaller stadium. It makes it a little more intimate, a little more shoulder to shoulder with fans, which again we're not going to be able to do right now, just with what's going on. But yeah, I could not be more thrilled as a former player and now a fan of UH football. Oh, having our home games at our campus could just be so much fun. I cannot wait to see what that develops into.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it does you got to look at it as presenting new opportunities, right? And you think of some of the crowds that they get at the volleyball games at the Stan Sheriff Center or the basketball contests, right? What Murakami Stadium, the atmosphere there, one of the best in the country when it comes to collegiate baseball. And so you take a little bit of that on-campus atmosphere and that kind of environment, and then you mix in football, right? Which always ups the ante a little bit when it comes to crowds. And I think you could have a pretty exciting game day experience. And the only bummer is we won't get to quite see that to its full capacity just yet, with the fact that fans aren't allowed just in. And then it brings up the recruiting angle of it as well, right? You're a guy that went through that program. And I think it's a really good point, because look, like everybody will, or people will say, I shouldn't say everybody, but people will always say, right, we got to keep everybody home, all of the local recruits. We know the talent here in Hawaii. And the fact of the matter is, like, if Alabama comes calling, if Clemson has come calling, like they have more and more recently, right, it's hard to compete with that. It is. There's no doubt about it. If Oregon comes and knocks on your door and they throw all of those facilities and that prestige and the level of play, it's hard, right? But when it's a recruiting battle between the University of Hawaii and like institutions, such as Mountain West Conference opponents, such as other Group of 5 conference teams, those are the battles that you need to win, right? Those are the battles that you need to keep those kids home with more regularity, or as much regularity as possible, I should say. And we've seen some of that with Coach Graham here in his first real full recruiting class. And with an on-campus game day experience, that might just help, right?
Absolutely. And, if, those who have had the privilege of going to a college football game on the mainland, the vast majority of those teams have their games on their campus, and it just turns into this giant, tailgating celebration of football, of your team, of your university. I remember a couple years ago, my teammate Drew Brown went to Oklahoma State, and I was able to go and watch him play at Stillwater, and they allowed parking on all of the facility grasses. I mean, right up to some of the dorms and things like that. And everyone, you just walk down the hill towards the stadium. And the way that our campus is situated, I think we could do something really similar to that. Obviously, it would be a headache to our grounds crew to keep some of the grass intact, down the road. But, obviously people are always complaining about our parking structure down there. I think there are other creative solutions to that. And the name of the game is keeping the game atmosphere on campus. And I just think it could be such a special thing, because playing at Hawaii is a really special thing. And bringing that to Manoa instead of going all the way out to Pearl City could be something very unique.
Yeah, I think that's as much a storyline as the game itself, right? With this home opener on campus, first time that Hawaii won't be playing at Aloha Stadium since the early 70s, which is kind of crazy to think about. So diving into Portland State a little bit here, we mentioned Hawaii 4-1 all time against the Vikings. All 4 of those wins coming in the 70s. A couple of times with June Jones as the quarterback for Portland State, a number of Hawaii and Portland State connections, right? Mouse Davis used to be the coach there. Jerry Glanville, former defensive coordinator under June, former head coach at Portland State. Brian Smith, just one of the recent coaching staff connections, if you will, obviously now on that Washington State staff, but was on that Portland State staff for a time in the late 2000s.
Coach Schmitty was my coach.
Yeah, that's right. He was the running backs coach or the old line coach. I can't remember at Portland State, I should say. Late, I remember when we were kind of in high school and he was up there coaching at Portland State with some of those guys. 45-20, we mentioned the last meeting back in 2000. Kind of a wild season opening loss for the University of Hawaii, coming off that magical 99 turnaround season where they win the conference and that Oahu Bowl. 5-7 in 2019 was Portland State. They didn't play in 2020, one of 5 Big Sky schools to opt out of the 2020 season. Big Sky played an abbreviated spring schedule. Portland State actually only played 1 game, a loss at Montana. The rest of the Big Sky played anywhere between 3 and 6 games in the spring. Their head coach, Bruce Barnum, in his 7th season. A couple of key guys on both sides of the football back with a lot of experience. Their senior quarterback, Davis Alexander, over 3,400 yards of total offense, real dual threat guy in 2019, 30 total touchdowns. He's already top 4 or 5 in Portland State history in terms of total offense. And they've got an All-American at corner, junior cornerback Anthony Adams. He was an FCS All-American in 2019. Some of the Hawaii connections, which is always a little bit of fun. Taiapana Purcell, Middlelani grad, is a senior safety. He's in the rotation at free safety there for Portland State, basically on the 2 deep. And then they got a redshirt freshman at defensive end in Kennedy Freeman from IAEA. He is a Punahou graduate. But now that we've kind of got the quick facts out of the way with Portland State, Hunter, is there anything in particular you're keeping your eye on with this matchup? As we mentioned, FCS, Hawaii has had a lot of success, 17 straight wins, I believe it is, against FCS competition since that loss to Portland State 21 years ago. Any particular position group, any particular player you'll really be keeping your eye on for this Hawaii team as they bounce back for week 2?
Just looking at the stat line, anytime you've got a quarterback that throws for over 3,000 yards, you better keep your eye on him, especially now that he's a senior and got some experience under his belt. Obviously, he's going to be poised and pretty comfortable in his skin behind the pocket. It kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier in the podcast. I watched it happen a lot of times when you got FCS schools coming in here. Even in practice, sometimes the feeling can kind of be this is an automatic win on the schedule, and because of that, you come out lacking. And that is one thing I don't want our team to do this week. I feel like we have a lot to prove, and I think we should treat this not just like any other game, but I feel like we should treat it like a home opener, a home conference opener, and we need to stick it to these guys. They do not come in here. I think it's bigger than just game 2 on our season. This is the first time that we, in a very long time, have we ever played directly on campus? I know we used to play at the old, was that Ford Field or?
Honolulu Stadium.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you look at the history of our program, this is the first time ever directly on campus we are playing a football game.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot lose this. It's a big deal. We need to go out there and show that this is our house. It literally is our house for the first time. And I don't know if you can feel it from me, but man, we cannot come out with anything but fire against this team.
Yeah, there's a sense of pride and ownership, right, that comes with that, with having that facility on campus and playing those home games on campus. And of course, again, the only bummer is there won't be fans there to kind of lead the charge as they go throughout. But I think you've seen some of that, right, in some of the comments immediately after the UCLA game, as well as throughout this early week of practice from guys like Jonah Olu, right, who kind of he was a little angry after that game. And I don't think that's a bad thing at all, than talking about, hey, look, we are going to use this as fuel, essentially, and we're going to come out and take care of business going throughout the rest of the season. And so, I think there was a lot of motivation coming off of that UCLA loss, and at least based on some of the comments we have seen, after that game and in some of the availability so far this week, that they are taking this with the right mindset of, hey, look, we've got to handle business a little bit better, and embracing the challenge of rebounding from a loss like that.
Yeah. I couldn't agree anymore. They're hungry. I just wanted to overemphasize that, just with the kind of cool history of what this week actually does mean to our program. If back to your question about different position groups, I think it's in the trenches again. Our offensive line, I would love to see them just create some massive holes for our running game, create more time for Chevin to make the throws that he has made his entire career. On the defensive side of the football, I would love for us to pressure this guy and force him to be a dual threat guy, because if we got a guy like Darius Muasau, he is a phenomenal sideline to sideline tackler, along with Panay Vi'i. We'll be just fine if we can pressure him. But if he's back there and he can kind of just sit tight, they've got talent. Don't be mistaken. Just because they're an FCS school, it happened in 2000. They can still dust us. So those are two position groups that I'm eager to see a contrast from week 0.
Yeah, and that's a good conference, right? The Big Sky, they play good football in that conference, no doubt about it. Nearly a 500 team in 2019. I'm kind of along the lines of you, Hunter. You know, I think looking for that consistent identity offensively, I think this will be a game that can really tell us whether or not that, or at least where along the process they are. I think that's something I'll definitely have my eye on, and same thing with you in the trenches. Seeing, especially on defense, right? What if they can kind of put things together, have a connectivity from that front 3 or 4 all the way through the back end. That'll be a big telltale for sure. Any final thoughts, Hunter? Debut episode. This has been a lot of fun for me. I hope you've enjoyed it as well. We can, at least I can hear the passion of a guy who has come through that program. But any final thoughts as we kind of put the finishing touches on this UCLA conversation and looking forward to Portland State?
Yeah, you know, there's nothing better than after a bad loss than strapping it up again and going back out there for another game, because people quickly forget what happens when you win. So I think we've got a great opportunity in front of us on our home campus, on our home turf. I'm super excited. Jordan, I had a great time today, man. Thanks again for having me.
No, this was a lot of fun, and thanks to everybody for tuning in on any number of the platforms that you can catch us on, the ESPN Honolulu family of networks, if you will. It has been a lot of fun. We will be back at it again next week, recapping the Portland State contest, and then looking forward to another Pac-12 opponent. Remember, 2 out of the first 3 games on the road in Pac-12 territory, as a trip to Corvallis and a meeting with Oregon State awaits on September 11th, the following Saturday. So again, for Hunter Hughes, Jordan Helle saying so long. Thanks again, everybody. This has been another edition of Hawaiʻi Football Now.
You've been listening to Hawaiʻi Football Now with Jordan Helle and Hunter Hughes, all from ESPN Honolulu.